Hey Ringside crew, welcome to the internationally known Dudes at Ringside podcast. And now here's your host, Joe, Panther the Third.
Hello there, wrestling fans, and welcome to another episode of the internationally known Dudes at Ringside podcast. I am your host, Joe Panther the Third, and man, 4 years of Dudes at Ringside. Wow. What a journey. 4 years. From sitting there talking about my Raws and SmackDowns, and then interviewing people. And I went back to my books, and I was looking, and a page hit me, and I felt a little emotional. And then another page hit me. And I remembered this young lady came on the podcast, and she was doing some kind of contest that was going to lead her to something. And I knew when we booked her, something was about to happen. But now she is back for a third time. Let's give a warm Dudes at Ringside welcome back to your friend and mine, Rain. Welcome back.
Hi.
Welcome back, Rain. Oh my gosh.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. I was gonna have you do the intro as you said, but you're not. You're one of those people that if you're not ready, you're not ready. But you're just doing your thing. So Rain, what have you been up to since the last time we were in the Dudes at Ringside studios?
I've been doing MMA. No, I wanted you to do the intro mostly because, for the most part, I'm always introducing people, and I feel like, I want someone to introduce me this time. So thank you so much for introducing me. I really appreciate it. So lately I've been doing cage announcing for MMA.
Wow. So what is it like to now branch off to the MMA, the MMA? I feel like I'm trying to say MMAs, the MMAs.
The MMA.
The MMA. It's MMA. Joe can't spell today. MMA, the MMAs.
So, I really love it. Mostly because, one, it was a challenge for myself, right? Like last year, I was thinking, what else can I do? I've done wrestling. Maybe I should try out something else. And, I reached out to different promoters, and next thing I know, I got an opportunity to announce my first ever MMA event for Up Next Fighting, which is an MMA promotion out here in California. And I remember, going to my first MMA event, and I was thinking in my head, I was like, do I belong here, right? Is this like the right fit for me? And I stepped inside the cage and I do my announcing, and I felt really good, and I felt like, okay, this is something that I can do. And then, after a few shows, I felt like, okay, this feels like home. I felt really comfortable. And, at the end of the day, ring announcing is my passion. So whether I'm doing wrestling or MMA, I love what I'm doing. And with MMA, there's a lot more things that I have to announce, right? Because with wrestling, usually it's like their hometown. The wrestlers wait if they want me to announce it. Sometimes they don't want me to announce the wait, if they have nickname or nicknames. Or or
names. It's so weird.
Yeah. So that's that for wrestling, right? And then for MMA, it's like there's like records and official weight. Like you can't make up your weight in MMA, whereas for wrestling, like sometimes I ask the guys, like, what do you want me to say for a weight? And it's like, sometimes they're like, oh, just say this, or or if they don't want me to announce their weight, they'll just tell me straight up, I don't want you to announce my weight, which is totally fine too. But for MMA, it's I feel like there's like, I don't want to say it's stricter, but there's like definitely like a template. You got to announce like the fighter's record, the fighter's official weight, fighter's height, what gym they're representing, and then where they're fighting from, what corner they're fighting out of, and there's a lot more information, but I I like it mostly because I feel like I'm building up the story behind this fighter that I'm introducing.
So
So yeah, in comparison with wrestling, it's basically the same. Like I'm like with wrestling, I feel like if I know the character, right, I try to justify the character by how I introduce the wrestler.
that's awesome. There's like different aspects to now what you do. I don't know if you noticed that. Like now when you're doing the MMA MMAs, like you can go into like detail of the wrestlers. Like sometimes they even let you do the detail of their outfits, right? Like coming out of the red corner with the blue and red tights with the checkerboard stuff. Like do they do that in MMA also?
With MMA, it depends. Because it still depends on like the promoters if they want you to say that. I've seen um shows where announcers actually would say, okay, out of the red corner, wearing whatever color trunks they're wearing, right? Personally, for the shows that I've done, I haven't announced like the color of their trunks. It's mostly what color or what corner they're fighting from. Are they fighting from the blue corner or the red corner?
Interesting. So now you joined me on this in this podcast journey. You're like a podcaster now as well, Rain. You want to talk about that as well? Because that's exciting.
Yeah. So, you know how I would be a guest on different podcasts, like your podcast before, and so when I started cage announcing, there is this podcast that this guy or this podcast had followed my journey um, as a ring announcer. And at that time that I met Tim from Fight Inside podcast, there's really no connection as to how I would be a guest in an MMA podcast, right? Because I was just doing wrestling.
Yeah.
And so when I started, doing MMA shows, he's like, "Oh my God, there's finally like a connection. We can bring you into the show." And so I became a guest on one of the episodes, and eventually he was like, "Hey, do you want to, be a guest co-host for the podcast?" And I did it, and then he's like, "Hey, do you want to do it again?" And then next thing I know, I'm doing it every single week, and I do love it because I'm pretty sure this is something that that you experience too, right? Like when you talk to people, when you interview your guests, you learn something from them, and that is one of the things that I like about being on the other side. We're in, now I'm like asking the questions versus I'm the one answering the questions. Yeah, I get to learn something from people. For the most part, I introduce them. I introduce the guests, right? That's why when you asked me earlier, like, do you want to introduce yourself, whatever, I was like, no, introduce me, because it's like for the most part, I'm always introducing people, whether it's in the podcast or when I'm doing it like inside the cage.
Yeah. So when you like go to your shows to do being the announcer, do you eat at the venue or do you like prep your like food with like weeks in advance? Like the days in advance. Depending on what shows you do that week.
So my system would be, I would eat before I leave, right? And then I would also bring my own food, mostly because I don't want to worry about where am I going to get my food. Because it's hit or miss if there's food at the venue. Usually there will be food. The problem is that, how much food is left by the time you get there or by the time you get a chance to eat, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to worry about it. mostly because to me, I just want to worry about fine tuning like the last, few things that I can, polish before the show starts. I don't want to worry about crap. I'm hungry. Like I don't have food. Let me go, order something. Like in my head, it's something that I can easily prepare and bring with me. And if there's food there and I want to try it, great. But if there's no food, I have my own. Um, so I bring, like a sandwich with me and like and a fruit, and then before the show starts, and then during the show, I try to sneak in like a granola bar, mostly for my blood sugar, but yeah, I try not to eat that much before the show starts, mostly because I don't know, I feel like I'm just hyped, you know, and I don't want to be too full when I'm announcing because it's basically coming from the core, right?
Oh yeah.
When I belt out, I don't want to be too full.
Like that movie with the girls, that one, the singing movie. They do like they do the what's that movie? There's a movie I was watching. The girl was singing in the beginning of the movie, and she let one out, and blah.
Oh my God, no.
I was like, ah. So for you before you do your announcing, do you do like you're like singers do their la 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 la? Do you do that before you do your announcing that day?
I normally don't. I, for the most part, kind of like move my jaw, like this, mostly because my jaw locks. So
Oh
I
no.
try to like stretch my jaw. Right, I kind of move it around. I do kind of like vocalize a little bit, but for the most part, it's the breathing that I try to kind of practice.
Hmm.
Right, because to me, it's all about how you breathe, and then being able to like let that voice out, and yeah, making sure that my jaw is good, and so that way when I start speaking, I don't feel weird.
You're not stuck like you got frozen.
Yeah, I don't feel like stuck.
Hey
I don't know.
guys.
The funny thing is, I don't know if like people actually notice this during events, and when I'm not on camera, I move my jaw. All right, I move my jaw mostly because to me it's like I'm trying to move it around because I'm trying to like stretch my jaw, and
Now you can have fans taking pictures of you doing your jaw thing, making TikToks, and they adding music to it. I make music when I'm singing. Oh God, Woods, if you're watching this, do not do this to Rain. I can see it now. You're going,
here comes Rain.
hey, Rain, how you doing? I'm a puppet. So, in closing, Rain, if my friends want to follow you on social media, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram or TikTok, or is that what the cool kids call it now? Threads. I mean, I'm still on
Threads.
X. I don't post
Mama
any.
Panther yelled at me and told me to get off Threads.
You know what? I have a Threads account just because I felt like left out.
Yeah.
You know how like on your Instagram it gives you like a number on like what number you are on Threads. I was like, oh my God, I'm being left out. Like so I joined Threads, but I rarely post on Threads. But yeah, you can follow me at Ringside Rain, and that's Raine. And then you can see my videos. I mean, I pinned my video from when I won the WWE announcer contest. So you'll see that video there. Oh, by the way, remember, I think you guys were my last interview before I won the WWE announcer contest.
Yep. I kind of like scan my little badge. If you had a 3D printer, I need for you to make like last people before Rain won contest.
Isn't that crazy? Because I remember like we were talking about that contest, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna win the contest, but
and I think I said in my positive Joe, I'm like, you're gonna win. And my old co was like, oh, come on, don't do that to her. I'm like, I just sometimes feel that I know something good's gonna happen, and it happened.
Oh, thank you.
Is there any this episode's airing in March, so is there any shows you're announcing at you could talk about?
So for the most part, if you guys are in Southern California, or if you're fans of mixed martial arts, or if you want to check it out, please go check out Up Next Fighting. You can find Up Next Fighting on Instagram at Up Next Fighting, or at upnextfighting.com. You can check out our show dates there. We do have amateur and pro fights, and it's quite an experience. It's great production, and you will really enjoy your time there. I have friends who have gone to our Up Next Fighting shows. I kid you not, they are not MMA fans, right? But they wanted to go to, like, support me, but they all had a blast. They all had a blast. So yeah, if you're in Southern California, Los Angeles area, we do our events at Commerce Casino. We also have events like in different areas, but for the most part, it's in the LA area. You can visit upnextfighting.com. And also, if you want to follow our podcast, it's Fight Insight Podcast. You can also check that out on my Instagram, because I also post stuff about our guests and our interviews from our show.
Awesome. So right before we go, Rain, if there was any kids that wanted to get into the business and do what you do and be an announcer or a commentator, what kind of advice would you give them?
Joe, my advice is take that first step. And this is what I learned, in this whole process of chasing my dream, right? When you're a kid, you have like a dream, and then you have another dream, and then you have another dream, and it's like there's so many options, right? And then you know don't be afraid to throw darts, right? Always take the first step, always take a chance, throw those darts. You will never know where it will land or where they will land unless you throw them.
Yeah.
And once, and sometimes what we planned in our heads, what we think that, oh my God, I'm going to be like this one day, sometimes it might not work out. But for the most part, it always works out for the better. Like, Joe, I didn't know I could be a ring announcer. I didn't know that. And I think we talked about this before, when I wanted to be a wrestling manager, right? So I made my videos on YouTube, as a wrestling manager, right? That was my goal. I wanted to be, a manager for Asuka. And that's how I got into my very first wrestling promotion. And I remember my very first promoter, he said, I don't have a spot for you yet as a manager, but I have a spot for you as a backstage reporter or interviewer. And I was like, sure, I'll try it. And on my second event, I showed up to be like a backstage interviewer again, but they canceled my spot, and I said, what else can I do? And they told me, we don't have a ring announcer. And I said, you know what? I don't mind trying. I'll do it. And that's how I started. That's how I became a ring announcer. And it's because I wasn't afraid to throw darts everywhere. Because at some point, Joe, it will land somewhere, and you'll be surprised at the things that you can actually do when you try. So whatever it is that you dream of, it's always about the first step. I know it's scary, right? Because I feel like with social media, sometimes it's like we always see that, everyone's got it together, everything's working out always for other people, right? But there's always a process. There's always that first step that people have to kind of get over. And just don't be afraid to take that first step, because once you do, then you'll get used to it. And then next thing you know, you're taking more first steps, right? And then you realize, and then when you look back, you're like, oh my God, I've taken so many first steps, and look at, where I am now, so whatever it is that you are dreaming of, whatever dream you have, don't think it's too big, like the WWE announcer contest, Joe. Remember, I was like, I don't know, Joe. I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna win this contest. But it was one of the darts that I had. Threw it. I hoped for the best. I won the contest.
Awesome.
I had no clue I would win the contest, but looking back, it's like if I held myself back from throwing that dart, we wouldn't, I wouldn't have won the contest. I wouldn't get this chair right here.
That's SummerSlam.
I
Yeah.
get the SummerSlam chair. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you would never had that fun experience.
Right?
So, Raina, I want to thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. You're on the 3-time wall. You're on there with like Kiara and a few other people that I just don't even remember. Like a lot of people in the past from this podcast, a lot of people don't really talk to the podcast that much anymore, and that's cool. But it's okay, and I'm happy that you have that 3 next to your name now, Rain.
Yeah.
I'm Joe Panther the Third.
And I'm Rain Cruz.
And we will catch you in the next one. Have a good day or have a good night, everyone.